Welcome to another episode of Systematic Geekology. This is a space where we seek to create and cultivate healthy conversations between those things we geek out on and the philosophical and theological questions that often arise out of our fandoms. Like, what does it mean to be human? What makes a hero? What makes a villain? How do the stories and narratives we geek out on shape how we live in the world? We are your priest to the geeks. We aren't all ordained, but we see ourselves as mediators at the intersection of geek culture and going deeper in our faith. We don't always have to agree, but we do respect each other, and we see everyone as a beloved child of God. Everyone geeks out on something, so come geek out with us and enjoy the show.
Normally on the show, we attempt to keep things as child-friendly as possible, but every now and then we can hit some harder subject matters or may even have some verbal discourses that may not be suitable for younger or more sensitive ears to hear. In this episode, there may be either a discussion on more mature topics or may have strong language, or perhaps both at once. Your discretion is advised.
You're listening to an Anazao Ministries podcast.
What's more important to you? Exploring the idea that war is bad, or wow, cool robots? On today's episode of Systematic Geekology, as we cover through our primary political series, as we are the priests to the geeks, going through this whole thing, we're going to be covering the Mobile Suit Gundam franchise from the very beginning all the way up to what's going on right now. I am so ready for this, but I could not possibly do this by myself. I had to have some friends, of course. You know him, you love him. He's better than all of us combined. It's TJ Blackwell. How you doing, TJ?
I'm doing great. Thank you for the introduction.
Excellent. Always. And of course, a returning guest, someone who was very interested in this. We talked about it on Facebook before all this. Had to invite him on to have some fun. Matthew Winter, returning once again. How you doing, Matthew?
Good. Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to this one. We've got a lot to cover and only so much time and to do it all because we're a 20 plus series and anime and manga and all this that are all over the place. Some of us have seen most of them. Some of them have seen a little less. We're just going to get through it. We're going to have fun. So guys, Gundam is what we're covering today. But before all that, what have you guys been geeking out on?
I'll let Matt go first. I'll abstain for now.
Okay. Boring answer. So, just how my brain is with my ADHD and anxiety and whatever else. I go through bingy obsessive cycles. So, still on the Dragon Ball kick from last time.
Nice.
I'm still waiting for Diamond to come out. So I'm just going through rewatching everything. I'm sitting down with the kid, Jordan. He's 7. We're slowly crawling through Kai. He's 7. Nice. We get 1 or 2 episodes and then he's done. So when I say a slow crawl, that's exactly what it is. But I've been through Dragon Ball, through Kai, Super, and I'm finishing up GT right now, as controversial as that is. But I'm also playing Dragon Ball Kakarot on my Switch. So even my gaming is Dragon Ball right now. Like, I get super obsessive until I literally just want to puke, and then I move to my next obsession until I can't stand that anymore. So still Dragon Ball for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's okay. We're GT truthers here on Systematic Geekology.
Nice.
Well, some of you are.
All of us. Every one of us loves Dragon Ball GT.
All right. Yeah. TJ, will you continue to disappoint me with what I think you're going to say about what you've been geeking out on?
There's a good reason.
Okay.
But
yeah, sure.
So the Valorant Champions Tour has just recently started. Kickoff was on the 15th of the month. It's been great so far. We've already seen some crazy upsets, but also Helldivers 2. Final answer.
Okay.
Great game.
Now, for everyone, that was just released, right?
Mm-hmm. Just very recently.
Okay. Very nice. Okay. Now, as for myself, I have started and am almost done with Persona 3 Reload. I am currently on, I was on the 222nd floor, but then the power went off in my building. So I lost all that progress. So remember to save,
Oh.
kids. So I'm currently, I didn't lose that much. I'm still on the 219th, but it's still the principle of the matter. It's like I have to do that all over again. Loving the game. Yeah.
I have quit playing games before when that happens.
Oh,
And they will just sit on my system, and I won't beat them for like 2 years.
Yeah. Repetition is the thing I hate the most in the world. That's why I love kids, but I can't teach kids, because they need that as part of growing up. That's not their fault, but I can't do that day after day.
Yeah, it's not quite the same, but I love Dark Souls. Dark Souls 2 is my favorite one. I had like 3,000 hours on one Dark Souls 2 account, and my Xbox's hard drive corrupted.
Oh,
Gone. I haven't played it since.
I don't blame you.
I understand.
But on that dour note, let's go into, since we are in our primary political series, one of these special questions we're going to be asking is like, does anyone here have a favorite political figure? Could be real life, could be fandom. Like, have at it. It's like, do you have someone like that's your favorite? That's a wide net I just cast there.
Teddy?
What?
Teddy Roosevelt?
Teddy Roosevelt? Excellent choice. And Matt, do you need more time?
Yeah, I'm fairly apolitical, so I'm thinking through my fandoms now and figuring out if there's a such thing as a cool politician even in fake worlds.
Fair enough. Yeah, I'll give you some more time, and I'll go with mine. It's from my favorite anime of all time, Legend of the Galactic Heroes. Paul von Oberstein, who is kind of the epitome of your Machiavellian figure, who is everything that I do is for the country, it's for my leader. And sometimes that's really good things. Sometimes it's very evil things. I mean, you kind of it's not a one-to-one, but you kind of get like a more Rommel kind of feel from him, for those of you who studied your history. But I think a lot better overall as a character than Rommel ended up being in real life. But, that's its own thing. So, yeah, Paul von Oberstein, the guy, if you want something to get done for the Empire and Legend of the Galactic Heroes, you go to him. You good to go, Matthew?
Yeah, this isn't a real answer because I don't think I have one, but I'm just going to go with it.
Fair enough.
I'm going to pick the Dogman, President of the World from Dragon Ball, because I think if a dog was a president of the world, things would be much better.
I'd vote.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, much better than the two candidates we're going to get next year, or this year, I should say. So there's that. On to our main discussion. That is Mobile Suit Gundam, not just the original anime, even though I'm sure a lot of our conversation might tend towards the UC, the Universal Century. It's definitely the most popular one out of every franchise from Gundam. So we're going to touch almost all of them. I know at the end I'm going to rate all of them, and that's not something everyone else has to do because
Thank God.
Because I've had the time to do such a thing. But for all of us here, like Gundam as a show was developed in the 1970s, late 1970s. It came out in 79, if I remember correctly, under the guidance of Yoshiyuki Tomino, who has kind of been like the main head for most of parts of Gundam, especially Universal Century. But as time went on through the different AUs, alternate universes, he stepped away for a little bit, let other people do it. The man has dealt a lot with depression and anger and a lot of stuff like that has kept him away from work and made him put subpar work out there, read Victory Gundam, and then other stuff like that.
Oh, we're going to fight there.
And then it's developed by Sunrise, who's the anime production company in charge of making it and drawing and everything like that has originally actually was canceled after, I believe, 43 episodes. But what brought it back is something that I will never once engage in my life because I don't have the dexterity for it. And that is the Gunpla building, the model robot building for the series that came about, that had a huge fan base for it. People were just going gaga over it. And then Sunrise smelled money. So they then brought and greenlit a sequel, Zeta Gundam. Your mileage may vary on that one. My mileage goes very down on that one. But I know other people really love it. So, and then time went on. Tomino kind of left, so we go to different AUs. We have G Gundam, Gundam Wing, After War Gundam X, so on and so forth. We get to Gundam Seed. The most recent, most popular one that's come out more recently is Witch from Mercury. There are more plans out there to develop other things in the Thunderbolt kind of region of Gundam, and I think there's actually going to also be an anime kind of spin-off, I think maybe even prequel, for Iron-Blooded Orphans that involves Venus, if I remember correctly. So I'm looking forward to that. I think it's called like Erder Hunt or something like that. But it is a massive franchise, one that obviously was real popular in Japan. Then in the 90s, came to America. Most of the people who got into the fandom, chances are it's because of what happened with Gundam Wing being their introduction to Gundam as a franchise. Then later on, they wanted to dub the originals. So we got dubs of Mobile Suit Gundam and Zeta. But then when the ratings kind of tanked, they didn't get to Devil Zeta, which is a travesty, but that's their loss because they're missing out on the best. Not to spoil things for later on. And we get to the point where we are today, where it has become way of a more massive fan base, not only in Japan, but also in America and really across the world, too. So, gentlemen, I think I probably know the answer, but what was everyone's introduction to the Gundam series?
Wouldn't you like to know?
That's why I asked the question.
Gundam Wing.
It could be Gundam Wing, I think. It's old. It's long enough ago for me that for some reason, I think that I had seen like some of the SD Gundam stuff first, because that was around at the time too. They were doing the SD Gundam thing, but probably Gundam Wing, and I'm probably just confused.
Yeah, for me, so they reran Gundam Wing on Toonami when I was like 11, and I didn't know that. I just was up, like woke up at night, and Toonami was on, and apparently on that one day in 2012, they played all of Gundam Wing.
Nice.
Who knew? Not me.
Okay.
Most of it, because they did a marathon.
Okay.
So I think they just did it for a couple weeks.
It was the afternoon Toonami kind of block back in the day that started in the 90s, would continue on in the 2000s until it kind of fizzled out for a bit and would become a part of Adult Swim later on Cartoon Network. Fell in love as a kid. It came out, I think, in the States into the year 2000. And I was at the ripe age to be ready for some real robot action. And I should specify before we go on, typically in your mecha genre, that is your giant robot series, there are super robots, which are a bit more bombastic. You'll have your Mazinger Z's and stuff like that would be a bit more your super robot. They do the extra special super stuff. Yeah, your Gitter Robos, where that calls all this. Gurren Lagann would probably be the one most American audiences would know the best, is that it just does super fantastical feats that, if you were thinking critically, no, that's not a thing. But because we're having fun, we allow it to happen on screen. Then, your more real robots is kind of what set Gundam apart from the things that came before. Even though there was part of what happened in earlier mecha series, we would have things like a Zambot 3, where it was a bit of a deconstruction of it, or we would have even a Mazinger Z, which is kind of like the precursor to a lot of all this, is like, Koji, the head pilot, didn't understand how to pilot it immediately when he dropped into it. Like in most mecha series, you just kind of get it. So, but Gundam would kind of popularize, hey, these things need repairs. These things are limited by, even with anime physics, there's only so much they're capable of doing. That's why you typically see them fight more in space, because if they get on the Earth, we have to create all bunches of things why the square cube law doesn't just break them apart the moment they enter the atmosphere. So,
square cube law is fake. That's why.
Yeah, I mean, and with that was the thing that set Gundam apart when it came out. Is it really kind of deviated from the super robot, which was the meta of mecha anime at the time, and really, I don't know if it invented, but it reinvented real mech. Because in UC especially, the older shows are actually hard sci-fi with how all of the tech works, and Just super, even the way the colonies are designed was based on the actual theories at the time,
Yes.
which we see update in the 90s because we moved from the cylindrical colonies to the wheels, which again was the popular theory for how colonies would work in the 90s. So they're trying to actually stick to real science rather than it being some fantastical, super alien living robot like Mazinga or whatever else.
Yes. And that's one of the important things too. For those of you who played Halo, you kind of get the gist of what some of those colonies would later develop into, like design-wise, is that giant circle in space where people would live. There's an atmosphere. It's a really cool thing. And like early on in Gundam, like you did mention, Matthew, is they would be a little more cylindrical, more like cigar shaped compared to what we get. But it was that adding that realism that kind of, as you said, really set Gundam apart from what came before. That also in the fact that the enemies were us. They weren't an alien raised out to get us or a bunch of robots or what have you. And it's certainly fun to be had there. Like I've watched them all and I enjoy them all. But there is something else to be said about a conflict between people that sets it apart from everything else. And that's one of the things you really got. Outside of 00, aliens don't exist in Gundam. And that was only in the movie. So it is what it is, and I enjoy it immensely. But moving on from there,
love Double
what
Zero.
is everyone's favorite? Excellent choice. Does everyone have a favorite Gundam series?
Ooh, whatever Gundam series I'm watching at the moment. No. Gosh. So I think as someone who had primarily seen Wing and G Gundam, when and I'd seen through OG, so Gundam 79 a couple times. When I decided, okay, there's so much more Gundam, and I decided to just start watching through UC for whatever reason. I think, we've discussed this, and I know we have disagreement here, but I think for me, Zeta stood out as I was going through all of that because of the grittiness and just because of really the weight of what's happening. I feel it is more accurate to war and destruction and PTSD and all of the things that go along with war. And I think it's just does what it's supposed to do better than other shows.
Yeah. Gundam, I do feel like is at its best either when it's gritty and real or when it's so out there that you just can't believe it. But my favorite is Iron-Blooded Orphans.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm a young guy. I feel like it was the first Gundam series that I really gave its own chance. Like Wing V, I just kind of happened to be watching and then wanted to finish it because I was annoyed that I saw episode like 6 through 11 first and then like had to go back and watch.
Fair.
So Iron-Blooded Orphans came out. I was on Hulu kind of a lot at the time watching Futurama reruns, and it's like, oh man, this looks good. I should watch this. And I did, and I really like it a lot.
Yeah, my for IBO, which I do really love, my introduction to that series was me incorrectly pressing the right episode on Hulu. Instead of the first episode, I clicked on episode 18 because that was the most current one at the time. So that was my introduction to the show. And I'm like, okay, man, I'm captivated, but I have no clue who these people are. Well, obviously, because they were set up way earlier. So, yeah. But for me, like, as the antithesis to everything that Zeta stands for, and I say this with all respect to my dear friend here, Devil Zeta is my favorite, even though its beginning, the mood whiplash you get from the ending of Zeta to the beginning of Double Zeta is something that, like, you get slapped in the face, and I don't blame anyone who gets upset at that. It takes a bit to get its own footing to find out what it is, but it gives hope back to the series. It gives a way for, hey, we suffered through all this here. There's a chance we can still fight this and stop, Xeon from taking over the galaxy again, and all these rogue renegade Earth forces as well. I love it. Judo is my guy. Like, he doesn't take crap from anyone. He's his own man. And as opposed to Camille, and that's not to say Camille is a bad character. It's like I gravitate towards one over the other.
Mm-hmm.
So that's me for Double Zeta. And I was in charge of the images, so I get to choose that one as what we show on the screen.
Yeah. That's my fault. I could have wrested that from him.
Good to have.
The story.
All right, guys, anything else?
Story-wise, yeah. I mean, I agree with you. It definitely gets good at some point. The last half of the show is brilliant. The Double Zeta itself, to me, kind of starts to break Real Mech. So I kind of feel like Double Zeta was where we started to see the shift towards less realistic mech design.
That's totally fair.
So I hold that against it also.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of unrealistic mechs personally. Why realistic mech? We can build that. We can try at least,
I think that's why. In my head canon, if we can have these things, whereas
that's fair.
If they get too fantastical, we cannot have these things.
Fair. Yeah, I see it like a really cool Hot Wheels. Man, I wish that existed. When realistic Gundams are real, we're going to look at the less realistic ones and be like, man, I wish that was real.
So if you're listening out there right now, or you're watching this video on YouTube, and you're wondering, okay, well, and you know nothing about Gundam as a whole, why would we include this as part of a political series that we're doing to explore the politics of the different fandoms like we've done for Star Wars and even more? Well, let me help you out here. So why would we choose that for politics? Because it shows up in almost every single one. Now, obviously, Universal Century is where it comes in the most.
Mm-hmm.
But guys, how does it come up in the many varied stories that we see? Just in general, there's plenty to choose from. I want to hear what you have to say.
I feel like what we're missing a lot here, that's a good image, is Gundam military. Flat out. There are a couple of series where non-military entities have Gundams, but by and large, these are just tanks.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much a war or squashing a rebellion or seizing land or imperialism, child soldiers, child slavery, poverty, regular slavery.
Racism, classism, all that, all that's in there too. It's all. It's actually we're distracted by the shiny robots and the explosions, but that's actually the stuff. At least in the UC continuity, that's actually what the story is about. Is the expansion of mankind into space and imperialism and colonies wanting freedom and just the interplay between governments and militaries and military coups and special ops takeovers and all of this stuff that feed the plot line through the Universal Century. And yes, the Gundams and the really mobile suits as a whole are the vehicles of war. But the actual emphasis, storyline-wise, is all the stuff behind the wars. The people that are inside the cockpit, their commanders, the militaries, and the governments they serve.
Yeah.
Completely agree. Did you have something you want to say, TJ?
No, just I've only seen a few Gundam series. I'm by far the least experienced member of the panel. However, there's barely an episode that I've seen that isn't at least a little political. And if not big political, then small political, like school political. Mm-hmm. But military school political, so it's still...
Mm-hmm.
If you'd like to support our show on Captivate, feel free to go to captivate.fm and find our show, subscribe. You'll get access to any future online D&D campaigns over there. You'll get an extra bonus question for 4 to 8 times a month. You'll get extra content like that through there. You also get a one-time donation you could make to help support the show right on Captivate. So you don't get anything for the one-time donation, but if you would like to just support the show once, do a quick donation, you can do that through captivate.fm. Our overhead includes editing software, marketing, equipment, recording software, and a whole lot of other stuff. And we really appreciate everybody who can help keep the lights on.
Yeah, it comes in different forms. That's the great thing about the AUs in Gundam is we can have the original, UC where we see like this big conflict between the Earth Federation that has acclaimed all these colonies across our solar system here. Yeah, that solar system, galaxy, different one. Solar system. Sorry, I had to science myself for a second there. And
because we have Jupiter colony. We talk about, we never get to see it.
Yeah. And Jupiter actually does focus in later on the UC for Victory Gundam. Then we have as the calendar for the Universal Century kind of changes, we have a conflict between Earth and Zeon. Zeon being a breakaway faction from one of these space colonies that decides, hey, Earth doesn't care about us anymore. You see us as less than. You send a lot of political prisoners here. So we're going to go like Space Australia, and then we're going to nuke Space Australia with a colony. Yeah, actual Australia, I should say. And that sets off an entire war. You get sides of like Earth Federation trying to control what they think is already there. Zeon trying to fight for their own freedom. Like, who is in the right here? Is anyone in the right? Should we be cheering for anyone? And then you get the whole conflict as new types start appearing. It's like, is this what humanity's natural progression and evolution as we head towards the stars? So that's UC for the most part. You get to stuff like After War Gundam X is kind of a serious thing there as well. Similar is what I meant to say. But in this case, Earth actually lost the war that we see in Mobile Suit Gundam. And then how does that work with Earth being technologically not as advanced as the people in colonies? Are they afraid of us? How are they going to fight it with us again? Then Turn A Gundam, kind of a similar thing in that respect of like Earth is at the point of like 19th, 20th century technology. After you find along the way, another war is broken out. It's a very cyclical thing. Kind of one of the themes of Turn A is that we keep going into space, we keep fighting with one another. Then civilization kind of gets wiped out for a bit. We get back into space, we recoup our losses. It happens again, rinse, repeat, and how like that can cause for people who were away from that on the moon, who had their own colony there, how they are very technologically superior to us. Yet, how could we fight against them? You've got Wing, where it's another flip on the typical thing where our space colonies are actually the protagonists here, and they send out the 5 Gundams to attack Earth as, revenge for everything they've suffered there. But it gets into a lot of political machinations of who's behind what. Like, should we trust Trey? Should we trust Oz? Like,
right.
Are the Gundam protagonists actually are good guys in this scenario, or have they been fed a lot of lies? Then we get, I try not to go through all of them, but just, I'll do one more. IBO, we get Earth colonizing Mars, seeing them as second-class citizens, and then getting the child slavery, child soldiers in that extent of, hey, you're only good for us if you get these jobs done. You are literally like, space debris is kind of one of the terms they use in there. Mm-hmm. Like, that's just how unimportant you are. Your lives don't matter. Well, what if we think our lives matter? And then you fight against the system in that respect. So once again, there's this other Gundam series I could go through, but for the sake of time and not being the only person speaking, I will move on from that unless you guys have something else you want to say.
Now, I was going to say, you have Double O. It's less, but it's still, like, it's there even, too. Because you've got, rather than a unified Earth, you do have an Earth that has several factions. We don't have colonies. We have, like, a solar production array or whatever that's in orbit where people live and work.
The elevators?
Yeah, the elevators.
Yeah.
But that is, we're using Gundams to basically try and enforce peace. Celestial being is. Because, as we mentioned earlier, there are aliens coming. And we need a unified mankind to fight the aliens. This is it's kind of the only Mobile Suit series where we see aliens and we see the Gundams really be kind of a extra military force. They're their own thing. But even in that, there's so much political turmoil on Earth that we still have that political aspect. It doesn't drive the action as much.
Well said. So, kind of mentioned it a little earlier through the descriptions of the different series, but in most continuities, not all, but in most, you kind of have at least two sides fighting a war against one another. We kind of start in media res, in the midst of that conflict, and neither one of them really seem much better than the other once you actually get into the meat and potatoes of it. Like, how do we feel that this is handled in the series, and is there anything we change about it?
No, I think it's great. I think that's the best part of most, I would say, competent fiction, that it is trying to make you realize like the duality of man, is that you actually can tell that like both sides believe in what they're fighting for. Neither side is completely unreasonable usually, but I think Gundam does that really well. Sometimes there's just one side is definitely on the right side.
That's my favorite part. In UC especially, Zeon did some really bad stuff, and we kind of get Space Hitler with but at the same time, we see what happens after the 1 year war. We see Stardust Memory, the Titans get formed. And really, the military takes over the government, and like the Titans are not good people. In Zeta, we learned that Amuro was basically in house arrest because us angry Earthnoids were scared of new types and what they stood for. So then, who were the good guys? And I really like that because I feel like in real life, especially in war and in politics and things like that, there are no good guys. You're out there killing other humans. You're not the good guys. That's just, from a moral perspective, in war, everybody loses. And I think that Gundam portrays that really well. There are some other decent, like, war anime, but I still think from that humanity perspective, that there's honorable bad guys. You can think about someone like Ramba Ral in the 1 year war era. Like, he's a dude. He's on the wrong side, so to speak, but like he's one of the best. Like, as a dude, like he's one of the best guys in the whole, from a character perspective, in the whole franchise. He just happens to be from Zeon. And then you've got guys who are on, the good side, quote unquote, and they're terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well put. It's one of those things that, done poorly, this could be one of those things I roll my eyes and move on with my life. And I think it happens every now and then in Gundam where it's like, okay, well, obviously both sides are evil. Humanity is bad and blah, blah, blah. And then I just check out. Other times you do it well, and I see all the intricacies. I see members of like Ramba Ral inside of Zeon who are fighting for that goal. Their original goal was to be acknowledged as people who were worthy of life, who were worthy of being respected. And then to have that cause co-opted by people like the Zabi family, who in Zeon, the backstory there is that Zeon Zaid Daikum, I think is his last name, is starting a political revolution to make sure the people in the colonies are treated and respected as people, as he's developing his own philosophy. It's like, I think humanity is kind of changing as we reach the stars. And there's the allegations of whether or not he was assassinated by the Zabi family, which in, I think, cut material, I think one point in time, Dozel actually apologizes to Sayla and says, yeah, we were responsible for that. But since that's not canon, I don't know if that's still true. But
isn't that
like,
in Origin, or was it cut?
Oh, was that in Origin? I can't remember if they did that in Origin or not. Because I know when originally it's done an excellent show. If they had continued the, I think, 50-some episodes they were supposed to do, it would have been in there. But they got cut because they got canceled. I know that much.
Yep.
But do you have the idea? It's like, oh, this is a good thing. Like, hey, like just because we send people to Space Australia, that doesn't mean they're all criminals and convicts and, they're less worthy of life than us over here on the Earth, and we're just so much better than them. But at the same time, you have people on the Earth who are letting that happen. But then you also have good men like General Revel, who is like, hey, like, I'm here to do a job. I'm here to protect people. You guys have literally sent space colonies that have decimated the world. I cannot have that happen. Let's fight against this. And you have Captain Bright, who is a kid who is trying to act like an adult because he's been forced into this impossible situation where he's got to get all these civilians and people who have no military experience whatsoever away from being destroyed in a colony where they were illegally making Gundams. So it makes them a target of war.
Yeah.
That never would have happened if they weren't doing this illegal thing. It's a good thing that adding that complexity into the situation makes you go, okay, well, maybe it's not easy for me to pick a side, but I know personally who I'm on the side of. Like, I can kind of get a little behind Char's like revenge scheme against the zombies, but like I'm still on Amuro's side at the end of the day because he's not going to shoot anyone in the back just because it'll get him closer to his goal.
Right. You were mentioning, Bright Noah, and man, there's maybe more than anybody. There's, man, talk about well done character development. Because he's a Federation soldier, but then you see him leading the anti-Earth Union group in Zeta to fight for the freedom of the colonies from a unified Earth government. And it's like he's actually fighting against the Titans, which were the special forces that were created to keep Zeon from reforming. And then he goes on to basically be the hero in Unicorn. He just walks in and he just knocks out the general guy. What we're doing is wrong. I won't be part of this. Like, he gets kicked out of the military, all that stuff, knocks out the general, and that was all over Laplace's box because the government had been hiding the original charter for the colonies, where space noids are supposed to be equal partners in Earth government.
Oh yes. Yeah. Now, TJ, let's go to IBO for a second. Give you a little more to talk about there. Because we have Gjallarhorn, we have Tekadon, we have Tewaz, we have whatever Russell Elian is associated with. Like, go through that a little bit.
Yeah. So, as a series, Iron Blooded Orphans it kind of starts as a revenge story. Child soldiers breaking free from what is basically captivity, being forced to fight a war they don't believe in. Starting their own security company, trying to give back to their people on Mars, and taking the fight back to the government. And then things get a little messy. They are children. They don't make such great decisions sometimes. But, that's just the way it is. They're children in charge of very powerful machines of war.
Yeah. Yeah, as time goes on in this series, it in my opinion, it kind of dips at the end. I don't believe it's very earned. That's not a downer ending. It's a bit more bittersweet. I think it could have been better. But you get to this point of our main group, Tekadon, is kind of fighting against the machine. They're the ones that no one saw any value in, but they're proving they're capable of doing so, making sure that there are reforms that need to be done, keeping Kudelia alive so that she can make diplomatic exchanges between Earth and Mars where they're treated as people, only to get stabbed in the back in the end, and just kind of all pretty much, spoilers for a lot of these series, but spoilers for IBO, basically no one survives outside of a select few. And that was kind of things that kind of lost me towards the end of IBO. I still love the series. It's still one of my highly rated ones, but I definitely think they went too far in one direction of making sides unlikable besides our main people. So I don't know what you guys think about that.
Yeah, I kind of like it. I feel like possibly the least, I don't know how to say what I'm trying to say. It doesn't require a lot of commitment to enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't have to be in it to be in it. Like I know who I'm supposed to like here.
Okay.
It doesn't play on your own moral compass much.
Yeah, IBO's definitely. It's not entirely clear cut, but for a Gundam show, it's quite clear cut, like who to root for.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I like that
that's
about it.
Totally
personally.
fair.
Yeah. It's not like, I don't know, to use a different example, Hunter x Hunter. We're like, oh, our main characters, bad guy, horrible people. Don't root for them. The Chimera ants are just trying to live. Surprise. That's enough for me.
Okay. Fair enough. You guys have anything else you want to add before we head on?
I will say that is the advantage of most of the alternate timelines. Is there, Seed being the exception because there's quite a bit of world building there now, but for the most part, it's a standalone show. You don't need the investment of understanding the political structures and what's come before and what's happening next. It is a self-contained snapshot of a story in one, usually 52 episode anime. And that's it. The characters that you have are the characters that you have. The good guys and the bad guys are usually more clear. Less with Wing. I'm still not really sure who the good guys are there, but for the most part, they're easier to digest than jumping into the UC because you need to understand the whole timeline.
Yeah. I have to feel like it also benefits Gundam to be so large. I know it's a fallacy to think like you're so large that you can't fail, but I genuinely think that Gundam could produce any series, whatever they want, and then as long as they don't do it again, they'll be fine.
All right. Well, one of the things that kind of gets started in OG Mobile Suit Gundam and becomes adapted in different ways. You have the X-Rounders in Age, you had the Coordinators in Seed, and so on and so forth, is that humanity's exploration of space, we've touched on this before, has changed us as a species fundamentally to the point that even people who aren't out in space have started developing these new type abilities. They possess these enhanced psychic connections to space, reality, people. Some people are capable of telekinesis. Some it just makes them pilot a mobile suit better. That also leads to the creation of psycho new types, which are kind of like artificially created new types as we get into Zeta and Double Zeta and so on and so forth. Like, how do we feel about how this new type idea is portrayed in the series? And do we agree with the premise that this will happen when we populate the stars?
Like it, yes.
So I think I didn't get it when I first watched 79, and that is because of how they had to shorten. But that
is not your fault.
No, if you watch the movies, which is actually for that particular content, my favorite form, rather than watching the 47 or 43 episodes of the show. 43 episodes of the show. If you watch the 3 movies, they changed some dialogue where then like the new type stuff makes more sense. Mm-hmm. Because I had watched 79. It's like the last 7 episodes, suddenly they're talking about like new types and all that stuff. It just like gets dropped on you. Gets dropped on you with the whole Char Lalo relationship just out of nowhere.
Uh-huh.
Like
I agree.
Up to that point, they were normal people. And suddenly, then to go and watch Zeta, and Zeta is all about that to the point where the military is trying to artificially create new types with cyber new types and all of that stuff. And I'm like, okay. But then my brother showed me the Gundam movies. And I'm like, okay, this makes a lot more sense. Because they just in a couple scenes, it's like they didn't rewrite very much, but they just added some dialogue about what new types are and all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, Now I get it. But it seems to change throughout the show. Because once you get, like, into the 2nd century of UC, we kind of don't have powers anymore. We've got, kind of, like, at the end of F91, Seabook is able to, like, feel her and, like, find her with, like, abilities or whatever. But, like, up to that point, they're like, oh, new types are good with machinery. It was just this, like, I'm good with technology, I'm a new type.
Yeah.
So they even seem to, post all the big wars. So I guess post Xeon, post Neo Xeon, post the sleeves, all that stuff. We get past that, and it's like humanity as a whole almost forgot what these things are.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's bad writing or if it's because it is more normal and they start to forget that people weren't always like that. Within a couple generations of there being new types, they forget that, hey, there's old types out there still that aren't like this. And so they actually lose sight of what it is about new types that makes them new. As it becomes more normal for humans to live in space.
Go ahead, TJ.
No, I like it a lot. It reminds me, and to me, that says that it inspired one of my favorite short stories that you had to read.
Yes.
All Tomorrows by C.M. Kosnin, where humans move to space and then start to change because they're in space now. It's different. But I'm a fan of the idea, at the very least.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that it is so abrupt in the original series that there are very small clues. And I mean, like, microscopic, you're looking at it with a microscope with the intent of seeing it, clues.
Right.
That there's something a little more to Amuro, there's something a little more to Char that makes them different than other mecha pilots. And then when we see Lala and Char's relationship and how she connects to Amuro, that's when we really start ramping up. Oh yeah, new types are a thing, and that's what we're all about. That's what we've always been about. And it's ridiculous looking at it that way. I agree, the movies are a lot better way to see like this being developed a lot better. But it makes sense from the sci-fi kind of point of view. Is like we really don't know how we as a species are going to handle living in space for extended periods of time. We're still not even out of our own, solar system at this point in time too. Like, how could that change us? Like, just moving where gravity doesn't affect us the same way, or we're constantly being pulled around in ways we're not used to on the Earth. Like, how does that change us as a species? I find that fascinating. And I agree as well. It's like they kind of lose their way after Double Zeta. You get to F91, you get to Victory Gundam, and it's like, oh yeah, we used to have a lot of those around, and then they kind of just petered off, but also they exist again, guys. It's cool. And I think that's just not writing as tightly as they should have. It's like, hey, we should have had someone on the Shrike team or what have you who was a new type. Maybe there is. It's been a while since I've seen Victory. And it's a pre-established thing, and we're also still using cyber new types. I think I said psycho erroneously earlier. They turn psychotic as a result of the cyber.
So there's the Psycho Gundam.
Thank you.
Piloted by a
that makes
cyber
a lot
new
of
type.
sense. Yes.
So I think you just combine those.
There you go. And good old new types
4.
here. Yeah, 4, who is unfortunately someone I really wanted to live, but Tomino just had to be in one of his depressive states at that point in time, and we lost her. I prefer
and
her.
Zeta, Zeta and Victory both, like, they're like Game of Thrones level of people just dying.
It's brutal. I would say Zeta, it has earned more than Victory 1,000 times more.
Yeah.
But it's that idea. It's like, oh, what does this mean for humanity? If we were to suddenly change, this isn't like a racial thing. This we've had problems with that in the past, but this is a new way of exploring those concepts. Like, it's the whole humans versus mutants in Marvel Comics.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, you guys are different. You are doing things that scare me. I don't shoot lasers out of my eyes. I can't control someone's mind with my brain, but you can. It's like, how do I wrestle with that? Do I just trust you implicitly? Do I put things and make sure you can't abuse those abilities? Like, would it be evil of me to prevent you from using something that God has allowed you to develop as part of, evolving throughout this bit of time here? Like, I love exploring those things, and Gundam, for the most part, does that fairly well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
you get into other series. You get the Innovades of 00, and then how they're kind of artificially created as well for the most part. It's like, how does that tie us to humanity, and all this? It's a lot of fun. I don't think that's what's going to happen when we go to space, but it's really cool to think so.
Yeah. The Innovators are almost more of like a singularity type, rather than like an actual evolution.
Yeah,
because they're tied in with what's the name of the computer on the moon?
Theta.
Yeah, they're all tied in. I don't know. They don't really say if it's technological or psychic or what, but the Innovators are tied in. They're tied in with this supercomputer on the moon, so that's a lot more technical than kind of other new typey type. And then it's not even really a part of the plot at all in Wing. Although you kind of want you kind of wonder about a few of the characters, just the way they are. Katra especially, I wonder if there's like new typey stuff there. But it's not. It's not in dialogue. It's not in the plot.
Yeah, I think at early drafts they were going to make, I want to say Yufei or Wufei into one, but I think that was like early drafts, and they kind of just stitched a whole new type thing at one point in time.
I mean, I think realistically, humanity's either going to get taller, lankier, and less strong, or the exact opposite.
Oh, in less gravity?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the opposite, and become more dense. To try and counteract
or
that.
Both.
I don't know.
Or maybe both. And then we get diversity there. You even get subspecies that adapt differently in space.
Yeah. I think it definitely depends.
Think that we'll get like telekinetic and psychic abilities. Yeah.
Not from that. Maybe,
also,
but not from that.
So I get the idea behind it, because like even now there are stories where a spouse just knows their spouse has died, or no, they're not dead. They're like, whatever, they get reports that they're dead, and they're like, no, they're missing, they're still alive. 5 years later they find their spouse. And that's because like there is something when you have that kind of intimate connection with somebody where there is a connection that is beyond, physical, hormonal, whatever. There's a soul connection where you're aware of the other person's existence. And so this is the idea behind new types. As we move into space and families are further and further away from each other, because you have families of origins on the Earth, but you have your cousins and your nephews and your grandkids or whatever out in space, our ability to have that connection gets stronger to reach across the vastness of space. So it's just this ability to have that same kind of soul connection, so to speak, but across space. But like when you get into Camille being able to like absorb people's souls and use it to turn the Zeta Super Saiyan, that just doesn't, that doesn't make any sense.
You don't think?
But
yeah, and we have Judo and Haman both like having a pretty much a Super Saiyan battle as well between their two auras at one point in time. It's a lot of fun, but I'm with you there. I don't think it's going to be a thing. It'd be cool if it was.
The initial concept makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I think that our ability to just be connected to friends and families on that psychic, emotional, spiritual level is something that does exist. And for that to just grow stronger because of the distance that's required to be connected to someone through space. Yeah. I can see that being amplified into more psychic empathic type abilities.
Yeah, I feel like what might have happened was they came up with the concept for new types, and then someone read a Fantastic Four comic and was like, "What about them? Going to space gave them superpowers. Why don't new types have superpowers?"
Just get hit by cosmic rays.
Yeah.
All right. So, unless anyone else has anything you want to say on this, I'll move ahead. Okay. So, one of the smaller kind of themes that kind of shows up every now and then, it shows up in Wish for Mercury, it shows up in UC, almost said OC, Gundam as well, is like the suffering of soldiers and civilians alike in the midst of war, because there are businesses out there like Anaheim Electronics, like the Pell and Jeturks, who are profiteering off of selling weapons to other people in the midst of war, in the midst of preparing for conflicts. I have a question for you, just not necessarily about Gundam, but is it inherently wrong to be a war profiteer, or do they serve a purpose in the world? I mean, just for example, we have the Russia-Ukraine war right now. It's is it ethical for someone to be selling weapons to either side?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Ethical? No.
Okay.
Profitable? Extremely.
So, I don't know. From a business and a workplace perspective, if as a business, if your business is going to be involved in a war, I think actually selling to both sides is the best way to stay neutral.
Yeah,
because then you're not on one side. You're not on one side or the other. You're giving both sides access to your resources. You're being fair and neutral.
yeah.
Now, but is war a good thing to begin with? And is war something that we should be involved in the first place?
Yeah.
So we have to answer that question. Before we can say, well, should we be selling weapons to both sides? Should we be selling weapons at all?
Yeah. I think the most ethical thing is to not be in a war, and to not involve yourself by facilitating said war.
Mm-hmm.
If
you are going to, you might as well
then play both sides so that you're neutral. Yeah.
So am I hearing that there's no just cause for war?
I wrestle with that.
Tell Augustine to see me.
I wrestle with that a lot because I'm generally an Augustine fan, so I can't just go, well, he was, but and just growing up in America and the culture that we have, this idea of just war, and the idea that the only way that evil wins is when good men do nothing, or the whatever the Churchill quote is, something similar to that. So just growing up with that as my meta, I have to wrestle with that. Part of me definitely says no war, no killing, whatever. We're literally extinguishing a life that God created.
Mm-hmm.
Another person who is a unique created imager of God. Who are we to have the right to end that? Because we didn't make it in the first place. But
and obviously, go ahead.
But then when you have a Hitler out there who's killing millions and millions and millions of people, do you just let that go unchecked under the guise of peace or pacifism or whatever? Or do you stop it so that less people die? These are tough questions that I don't think we're ever going to have answers to. We're going to have to wrestle with it as long as humanity continues to exist in this plane of existence. And so
obviously, in the span of this conversation, we're not going to solve that question, but I want to bring it as part of the series that we're covering here, as part of the politics you have to develop.
Absolutely.
And as someone, I'm not nearly as jingoistic as I used to be when I was 18 years old. I'll put it that way.
Oh, thank God.
But I still favor direct intervention. Like, I was angry as the Iraq war was starting up that our reason for going was the weapons of mass destruction. Like, sure, yeah, that's a reason, but there's also people suffering under a dictator. Like that is my reason for going there, and hopefully having competent people, which we obviously didn't have, to start a new government, introduce democracy to the area, cause as fewer problems as possible. And knowing I live in a world where there is no such thing as peace, in a world that has none of it, but we still seek after it. So that's easy for me to say, but I'm also not the person who had to make that order. I'm not the person responsible for the lives of soldiers on our side who lost and the soldiers on their side who lost. And I'm also, as someone who kind of believes in a stricter doctrine on hell, I recognize that certain people who are dying in that conflict, as how I interpret scripture, aren't making it to where I want them to be. And by making that decision, you could argue, I would argue no, that I'm the one who brought them there. I would argue ultimately it was them making their own decisions, but still I am a factor in how they weren't able to continue living their lives. That's something that I need to wrestle with. That's something I need to think about.
I was going to say I'm going to not pull that thread because we'll be here for like another hour, so I'm just going to let that sit.
So for me, when it comes to the topic of war profiteering, I like the neutrality you're trying to send out. But as someone who thinks a little more black and white than the world wants me to, I'm selling to Ukraine in this conflict. I see what's happening with Putin being in charge. So I'm not acting like Zelensky is some paragon of moral virtue, and he's just that much better. But I see someone who was unjustly invaded. I'm going on their side. I see Anaheim Electronics selling to multiple sides in the midst of a conflict where we have the Titans, we have the AUG, we have Neo Zeon rising up as well.
And they're making all the mobile suits.
Yes.
That's it. Yeah, if you want a mobile suit, you go to Anaheim, they make it. Doesn't matter what side you're on. They're the only ones building the machines of death that everyone is using. And they are getting rich.
And there's something to say about what is more important, business or human lives. And unfortunately, along the way, a lot of people will say, well, I'm making the money. What happens with it after the fact, that's on them, not me. And that is very hollow to me, ringing in my ears, hearing someone say that. But someone's going to be doing it. So why shouldn't it be me, or why shouldn't it be them? Like, I mean, if I were in charge, thank God I'm not in charge.
Have you considered that we would be making much more money than you?
Yeah, it's why I'm glad I'm never, ever, ever seeking any role in a political organization at all, because I know, number one, I'd never get elected because of the stances I take on things. And two, I don't want that responsibility. Now, it's easier to armchair philosophize on all this and say, this is how you should be doing things. But to actually be the one to say, hey, like in my convictions, the fact that there is child slavery in the world, or there is human trafficking at all, that means I'm invading all those countries. I'm releasing them, freeing them. I don't care about international law. That is me, what I want to do. Now, that is not a very practical thing to do. That's not a very smart thing to do, but it's a very moral thing to do.
Right.
So it's all these things. So I can't answer these questions that I presented fully. Like, obviously, I'm going to take a more hardline stance on Anaheim Electronics and what they do in Gundam, because I'd be a little harsher on someone who doesn't actually exist. It's a little easier to make that argument, or to, the corporations we have in Witch from Mercury that are going all these things, skirting the rules. It's not a Gundam because it doesn't have this in it, but we're still trying to sell you products for a war we know is going to break out eventually along the way. So why don't we just get on top? Someone's going to do it, so we have to be the ones to research it. We're doing the things that's right here. It's them. They're the ones who are, escalating conflicts on Earth and all this. Yeah. So there's that. Something we could easily do a whole episode on, but I wanted to bring it up because it is a facet of Gundam as a whole. What else do you guys have to say?
Just Witch from Mercury sounds like the most American Gundam.
I haven't seen it yet. I need to watch it.
It's well worth your time. You'll get my ratings in a little bit.
Waiting for the next part of Hathaway.
Oh, yes. Have two been released or just one?
Just one. At least that's what's on Netflix.
That's right. Okay. Yeah, Hathaway's Flash, I'm looking forward to more of that, because that gets into it deep, especially with his relation to certain other Gundam characters and how he ends up on other sides. Yeah. It's not going to be a pretty picture. I'll put it that way.
No, not at all.
And yeah, speaking of not pretty pictures, another big facet of this franchise are child soldiers. As brought up multiple times over in this series, as pretty much the vast majority of our protagonists end up being 17 or younger. I think we might have had like what Double O would kind of be an outlier in some respects because I think they're a little older, some of them. But for the most part, our youngest that I remember is Uso for Victory being 13.
Yeah.
In the midst of a war, 50 plus episodes. Oh, actually, I think it's 49. And having to be involved with killing people. Like, what do you believe the varied Gundam series are saying about this real world problem? And what are our thoughts on its execution within the franchise?
Well, it seems like we should be giving our children guns is what Gundam wants us to do.
Or not wants us to do, which is why it's so prevalent in the storyline.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, that's probably like Zeta feels darker because of the art style and like the grittiness of the characters. But in actuality, the truly darkest show is Victory, and it has the youngest protagonist. Because, like, not only is he a child soldier, but he is a child soldier protecting other children.
Mm-hmm.
You have him and his friend who found a little baby, and you've literally got babies raising babies. And then he's flying the Gundam to protect this little child that they just found. It's horrifying to us, but, like, and I'm not saying this is any kind of justification, it's just reality. Like, throughout history, child soldiers were normal. If you were old enough to bear arms, you fought for your family and your country and your land, or, your last cow, or whatever it is that you're fighting for. As soon as you're old enough to bear that arm, it's your responsibility to take up arms. So we're back to the same question. Is it correct to take up arms at all? If it is, then why is it okay for adults to take up arms and not children? If war is just and fighting is just, and we want to teach our children to be moral and just, then why is it wrong for them to be involved in the fighting? I'm playing devil's advocate here. I'm throwing that out. But, like, if war is just, and we want to have children who are just, then why not have children fight?
I already said we should. Put the children on the front
always
line.
To Maverick. Let's remember who our target audience is. The original target audience, I'm not talking about the otaku and the weeaboos and the like who enjoy this far older than before. This is primarily targeted at children, younger teens, mostly boys.
Right.
And typically speaking, in those series, who do you want as your protagonist? Someone closer to me in age.
Right.
So that's why it keeps happening time and time again. Amuro was what, like 16, 17 in Mobile Suit Gundam?
It was
Uso
15 when it started, I think, and then by the end of the war, he's 16.
There you go. So you want someone you can relate with, especially when your target audience is that age. So, who's easiest? That person my age. What would I do in those circumstances? As someone, if I were going after that audience, I would probably do the same thing. I wouldn't have, a 33 balding man like myself as the protagonist for a series geared towards, 12-year-olds. Right. Maybe they enjoy it. Maybe they don't. But statistically speaking, they're probably going to enjoy someone like that.
Right.
Now, as far as what the series as a whole is saying, it's like War is Hell is the main theme of Gundam. Regardless of what franchise you get into, no matter how war very little doesn't directly affect the events of things that are going on, war is hell. And because of that, bad things happen. Because of that, people are forced into impossible situations. The entire white base in Mobile Suit Gundam, and was it the Archangel and Seed? I have to look it up again. Because Seed is kind of a pseudo remake of the original. It branches off, thank God, as time goes on, becomes its own man, and then Destiny happens, and that's another issue. But as things happen there, you get, hey, these are kids being forced in a situation because of the actions of adults. What do we do with that? Oh, well, that's what I have to do as a child anyways. This is just a more fantastical presentation of that. So what is it saying? This shouldn't be happening, and we're going to show you why this shouldn't be happening. We're going to have Camille at the end of the series, essentially, respect for those who would be a little more sensitive about this topic. He is essentially mind raped at the end of the series and catatonic. Thank God something happens along the way for Double Zeta to improve some things, but still, this shouldn't be happening. Uso in Victory Gundam has to murder multiple people, some of them not even in mobile suits, in order for him to survive. This shouldn't be happening. But it is. How does our character progress from that?
I think they're trying to say it's hard to fit an adult in the Gundam suit. It's a lot bigger.
Well, you contrarian. You guys have anything else you want to say on this?
I'm just trying to remember. I've seen Victory exactly once, so I'm just
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, generally, it's true. The protagonist is meant to be the vessel through which the viewer can be part of the story. They're the link. And yeah, so I mean, Victory, I don't know how much you know about it, but Victory was kind of a middle finger from Tamino to Sunrise. Because, like, he was done, actually, with Gundam stuff. He made Zeta and then Double Zeta, and then they're like, hey, you need to make something that's more for children. So he did that by having a young protagonist and then proceeding to make the Gundam show where the most amount of people die.
Yes. This was he was trying to torch the franchise as much as he could, make no one else interested in it. This was another one of his massive depressive episodes, not helped by the people at Sunrise making decisions behind his back, changing the structure of how those episodes happened because they aired the original 4 out of sequence.
Yep.
Because they wanted to get to the Gundam as soon as possible.
Yep, they wanted the Gundam in the first episode.
For merchandising reasons, because they got to make that moolah.
Right. And then FF91 and Victory both failed from a merchandising perspective.
Yes.
Anyway, so take that, Sunrise.
This actually also reminded me of War in the Pocket, 0080. Where we get, what is his name? Starts with an A. Albert? No.
Right? Alfred, isn't it?
Alfred, yes, Alfred. Al, as he's referred to in the show a couple times.
Yep.
And you see him become best friends with a Zeon pilot who is, oh no, the Federation's doing exactly what they did in the first Gundam and making mobile suits they shouldn't be because it disagrees with the treaties they've made on a mission that is not sanctioned officially, but something that they would be doing anyways to prevent the Federation from making another Gundam, when he's also best friends with the pilot of that Gundam, who is actually a military trained woman. And in the process, the two, Bernie and Christina, the Zeon pilot and the Federation Gundam pilot, start falling in love with one another, end up in the process killing one another.
Because they don't know who the other person is.
Yeah. And you have Al as his friends who are the same age as him. He's about 10, 11. I think he's still in grade school.
Love war. They love mobile suits. They're super into all of that. And he literally watches his two best friends kill each other.
And there's like, man, I hope there's another war that happens. I want to be a mobile suit pilot. And it gets to that whole, like, war is hell. You shouldn't want this. But he can't explain it because they haven't understood the things that he's experienced. And I think, honestly, that's the best Gundam has ever been in the war is hell kind of mantra.
War in the Pocket is fantastic.
Yes.
It was the
in a very short amount of time.
It was the first. It was the first OVA. It was the first Gundam piece not made by Tamino, but it is fantastic.
Yes. It actually shows you why these conflicts are bad versus like, hey, like, oh, wow, cool robot. It's kind of like what people will say for people who just kind of watch Gundam and don't care about the politics. It's like, oh, the mobile suits look cool. Is kind of the derogatory term people throw away at them. The kids are those people. They don't get it because they see these really cool looking mobile suits, in action. It's like, yeah, as a kid, that's one of the reasons why I watched it. because it looked cool. And now as an adult, I can see, this is cool, but I also appreciate the deeper themes behind this. But it's hard to explain that to someone who's never experienced that loss.
Mm-hmm. Or is it F-91 where they're fighting inside a colony and the spent shells are falling out of the gun and the casings
by
are
the people protecting them.
Right. And the empty casings are falling on people, killing them, crushing children while they're protecting them.
Yes. Yeah. Some people argue that's a little too much, but I knew what they were going for there. I'm fine with it.
F-91 would have been great if he had been allowed to make it a show.
Yes.
So we would have gotten Crossbone and all of that, which is awesome.
Oh, man, I want Crossbone to be animated so bad. So you guys have anything else you want to add to this discussion before we start wrapping things up?
No, I just think it, lower
the draft age.
God almighty. God to Himmel. TJ.
Being someone who was initially sucked in by Wing, like pretty much anyone in the West, or at least in America, but then getting into UC and really like Gundams are cool and all that, but it has quickly become about everything we've discussed today, and it is my like maybe outside of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Outside of that, I think that just because that's live action. But I think that and then the Gundam franchise are like the two best War as Hell franchises. Like if someone wants to understand war bad, like Gundam is a great place to start. And you get to see cool robot fights while you're at it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
All right.
If Fallout wasn't so fun, it would be Fallout. I think Fallout delivers the message well. It's just too fun to play.
Speaking of, Fallout will be a part of our primarily political series as time goes on. So look forward to that. All right. So as far as things go here, rating and reviewing, like it's kind of difficult to do for an entire franchise. Like, what do you guys think? Like overall, what would you give Gundam? And I will give my ratings for everything I've watched.
Why don't you just go through them and I can chime in on the ones I've seen. I know I haven't seen what you have, but I've probably seen more than TJ.
Definitely.
I'm probably in between somewhere. Man, I think Gundam as a whole, it's hard. You almost have to rate UC and then rate everything else. Because like UC as a whole, just in the continuity, at least if we do 1 Year War through Unicorn, right? Because F-91 and Victory were both Tamino. Well, actually, he really liked F-91. Sunrise didn't. So Victory, he torched. Those are bad on purpose. One ruined by Sunrise, the other ruined by the other. But so if we just look at the story of the 1 Year War through Unicorn, man, other than I think the new type stuff gets a little bit ridiculous by the end. So that probably knocks it down to an 8.5 for me. Okay. UC. And then, the other stuff is much more just fighting robots, which, that's fun too. But those all other Gundam shows are probably a 7 just because they don't have the world building and the continuity, which are two things that I'm really into.
TJ.
I've seen Wing V, and Iron Blooded Orphans, so 9.
Okay.
9. Yeah.
Excellent. I'm going to give the franchise as a whole a 9. If these numbers I give don't match up, don't worry, it's my math, not your math. So don't at me. Double Zeta, After War Gundam X, Turn A, 10s. Masterpieces all. Witch, IBO, 9.5. Wing, Unicorn, 9. The 8th Mobile Suit Team, Double O and Narrative, 8.5. War in the Pocket, F-91, G, The Origin, and Hathaway, 8. The original Mobile Suit Gundam and Gundam Age, 7.5. Thunderbolt, Seed, 7. Stardust Memory, 6. Zeta and Victory, probably my most controversial picks here, 4. Reconquista in G, and Seed Destiny, 3. And I think 3 is a little too generous for me for Seed Destiny, but I was being nice. So does that end up as a 9 overall for the franchise? Probably not, because I know how numbers work.
Not even
but
close.
That's what I'm going to say.
Man, I get putting Victory in a 4, but I just Zeta.
Hey, man, that's why we rate things differently. That's why we have these different scales. We're going to look at the same product and have different opinions on it. That's the fun fact about that. Yep. As much as, Joshua still loves The Last Jedi and TJ loves it a little more than me, and I have to beg forgiveness for God before I take communion for my hatred in my heart towards them. It's just how it is. People
Those
like
movies
things.
Don't exist for me.
I love all 8 Star Wars movies.
All right. Before we get into that discussion again, and that's my fault for bringing it up. As we're wrapping up, guys, what real life politician do you think would enjoy your favorite movie?
Well, first I have to pick a favorite movie.
And I'll go ahead and give you time to think, because my answer might be a joke answer. I'm thinking my favorite movie of all time is Return of the Jedi. Can come to it every single time. I know there's stuff that's messed up in it. It shouldn't be like, if I'm looking at it objectively, it's not a 10 out of 10, but it is to me for what it means, for what it represents, for hope and franchise and all that. I think, given that he made an entire program around it, it would probably be Reagan. Now, I can't prove that. Reagan and I sometimes agree, sometimes we don't, but I think he would enjoy Return of the Jedi, where he's still around.
What was the exact question again?
Which politician would...
Okay, so not
I
enjoy your favorite movie.
Okay, I think Andrew Yang would like Treasure Planet a lot.
Okay. Treasure Planet, excellent choice.
Yeah.
I don't know that I can answer that.
That's fair. The answer is I don't know. I don't know is an answer. That's something people need to be able to say more often. So I won't cut you down for that. So moving on from there, guys, you have a recommendation for the audience to check out. Doesn't have to be about mobile suits or anime or anything that we've talked about today. Could be anything in general.
Watch Starship Troopers. Helldivers 2 is getting really big, and it's based on Starship Troopers loosely. Has a lot of the same themes. Fantastic game. Fantastic movie.
Okay. Matthew.
Let's say completely unrelated to any of these topics. Something, I scoffed at for a long, long time. Thought it was nonsense and whatever, but it has been changing my life, changing my headspace for sure, and just making me a better person all around. If you don't already, I recommend practicing silence. It can be 2 minutes, it can be 5, but just find a place and a time to just be quiet.
All right. Yeah, that's a great thing about recommendations. They don't have to be about anything we've discussed. They could, they can't. It's whatever is on your mind. That's a great one too. Like silence. I'm not good at silence. I get very antsy. I can't do it at times, but it's good every now and then to shut everything off, get away, and just think. Or not even think sometimes, just get away.
Yeah, just quiet your head too. Just complete silence.
My actual recommendation would be Fang of the Sun Dogram, one of my favorite mecha shows from that 70s, 80s period. If you want an anime that gives you mecha action, but also actually cares about logistics and economics and how that would affect a war or civil war, Dogram's the way to go. Like, it's got some great characters in it. It's got some great action for its giant robots, but it's more real robot compared to super robot. It's a lot of fun. So guys, thank you for listening to today's episode. We really appreciate everything you guys are doing for us to continue coming back here. It means the world to us. If somewhere out there, so someone is saying, that's what you rated, that specific Gundam series, Christian, I'm going to have a talk with you. I'm okay with that. Join us on Discord. Join us on Facebook. I will listen to what you have to say, and we will have a fun argument over it. Please, just if you get a chance to leave a 5-star review in your podcasting platform of choice. I'm going to shout out some patrons real quick in no specific order. Russell Gentry, Justin Vaughn, Annette Knoll, and Jeannie Mattingly. Thank you guys for helping keep the lights on. We really appreciate everything you do. But remember, we are all the chosen people, a geekdom of priests.
If you love our show, you can follow the whole network in a single feed on Spotify at Anazao Ministry Podcast or the network page on Apple Podcasts. There you'll find shows like The Homely, The Whole Church Podcast, My Seminary Life, Let Nothing Move You, Dummy for Theology, The Bible After Hours, as well as mine and my husband's show, The Clydes, where my husband Taylor and I go through weekly discussions in a devotional conversational method to help us all get closer to one another and God.
Do you love systematic ecology as much as I do? Of course you do. So why don't you hop on over to the Systematic Ecology shop and get yourself some merch. We have clothing like hats, extra soft t-shirts, sweaters, hoodies. We even have glassware and mugs. One of my favorite coffee mugs that I use every morning is a coffee mug that has on it, share the faith, share the geek. Yeah, I get my geek on first thing every morning, thinking of systematic ecology. And I know you need to hop over there and get you some merch, represent us out in the wild, out in the public, and let people know that you too like to share the faith and share the geek.